capitalism has had on the US. When I first went there in 1970, I found a secure middle class, an employed working class, good schools, splendid universities, miraculous infrastructure. In answering to the market gods since that date, it has become a country of disastrous rifts, of a rust belt which it lacked the will to revive or transform, a country where a good education costs Lamborghini's worth of debt, in which society is riven still. It remains an extraordinary and creative nation, but its flaws have become pernicious through the support of the same brand of market economics our politicians pay lip service to here. So what I say about all that, I believe very sincerely, but I must emphasise also that even there I'm asking questions. Old punters are allowed to ask questions, aren't they? It's up to them to make them amusing questions so the young aren't bored by them. I hope above all I have done at least a little of that. I approach other and profounder human mysteries in this book. There is the great mystery of why the human soul, whether in the Arctic or the Tanami Desert, comes up with the same sort of cultural habits and rituals and versions of the same myths. I try to look at how the collective unconscious works with novelists and other artists, and how much of a novel or any other creative work comes from the unconscious rather than the conscious mind. And thus, I argue, any mug can write a novel. I look at the amazing advance in the status of women in my lifetime, and of course, how far must still be travelled. I look at death, and the methods I have used possibly to delude myself into believing that turning in your personhood and your breath forever might not be as utterly woeful a business as it seems. After all, the great majority of humanity, all of them without any gifts for it, have achieved that obliteration called death. Nonetheless, when I am called upon to leave the earth by some little cardiovascular or other systemic failure, I'm sure that if you're in the neighbourhood, you'll hear my complaints, unless I'm one of those fortunate who go out on a merciful tide of palliative care. As an ageing heterosexual, I also look at the relation between us, the children of the 1930s and unnatural men, as homosexual males were called. How murderous males have, since my childhood, punished these outcast men. As author of Schindler's Ark and Schindler's List, I look at the long endurance of anti-Semitism and the other question of an Israeli state, a militant one established back in the very territory from which the Great Dispersal came, after the Roman destruction of the Temple in the 1st century. How do these two phenomena, ancestral anti-Semitism and the modern, often excessive reactions of the State of Israel, sit together? And as a former student for the priesthood, I look at God and the question of describing or denying it from our little suburb on a branch line of the good as infinite and yet ultimately doomed system we call the universe. I have become overwhelmed in old age by a sense of the antiquity of Aboriginal occupation. The first arrivals of Homo sapiens on our soil may have been earlier than 80,000 years past. That intense focus, when applied to our settler history, raises new adjustments for our imaginations. It also suggests new focus, now that the bush blazes and floods with lethal intensity, and after less than 2.5 centuries, we ask ourselves whether we even read the continent for what it was. Then there are questions such as whether our convict stain was actually a convict bonus. I look at the infatuation of grandparenthood, the third phase, after youth and marriage, of the getting of at least a little wisdom. Maybe, unlike a bottled-in Bond ranter, I'm fairly careful in these pages to offend no one, of course, other than believers in neoliberal economists and corporatists. But they have so many favours and bouquets from governments worldwide they do not need mine. Commonwealth. When I was born,